Now all he needed were fireworks for thrust, and fortunately, Erebber's stockpile of gunpowder would keep him supplied for years. He could fly whenever he wanted, crash into mountains at leisure, and never worry about splattering on the ground. Time to check in on Thorin. Packing the last of his loot, Eric followed the tunnel, winding his way toward the forges. If I remember right, past this gate and down the ramp. As he passed one of the massive dwarf-built furnaces, a new notification flickered into view. New structure set unlocked. Erebber Lonely Mountain crafting line. Added, Erebber multi-block industrial structures. High-temperature steel smelters, giant bellows, mineral conveyors, forging anvils, molten metal pipelines. A fully integrated dwarven industrial complex had just been added to his crafting repertoire. Eric stared at the list, eyes wide. Chapter 81, Obsession. Among the countless strange and intricate multi-block structures now available for crafting, Eric spotted two familiar items in the recipe index. The first, a dwarven repeating crossbow, the second, the black arrow. The crossbow was relatively simple to assemble. It required crafting various parts and fitting them together like a puzzle. The black arrow, on the other hand, was an entirely different matter. Forging it demanded complex techniques, specific forging temperatures, and more than a little smithing experience. And yet, its properties were well worth the effort. The arrow came with a built-in loyalty enchantment. No matter where it was thrown or how far it flew, it would always return to its rightful owner. Just as the legends said. More importantly, it had armor-piercing properties and was especially effective against dragons. As Eric scrolled through the schematics unlocked by reclaiming Erebber, his heart skipped a beat. Gears. The item description was brief, but the implications were immense. These gears could act as substitutes for some redstone mechanisms and even power basic automation systems. Dwarves had long incorporated such technology into their architecture. In fact, the secret passage Smog had once overlooked relied on precisely this kind of mechanism. The one that opened with a pull of a hidden lever and raised a 7-meter-tall iron gate. If that was the level of sophistication dwarves once achieved, then after returning home, Eric had a long list of upgrades in mind for his own territory. Found it. Near the cellar, Eric heard a familiar voice. Bilbo. The hobbit had discovered the Arkenstone and was handing it to Thorin. The dwarven king's eyes locked onto the glowing gem. Without a second thought, he snatched it from Bilbo's hands, gazing at it like a starving man presented with a feast. Ah, the heart of the mountain, the Arkenstone, so beautiful. My precious. Thorin whispered the words under his breath. Bilbo's expression froze. That word, precious, sent a chill down his spine. A shadow flitted across his thoughts, making it momentarily hard to breathe. Dal Guldur. In the ruined tower, a great eye, ethereal, pupilless, suddenly turned north. I sense its presence. Bring it back to me. Sauron's voice echoed in the void as he summoned the 9 Nazgul. The command was clear. But then, where do you think you're going? A calm voice cut through the darkness. The great eye turned, and 3 figures emerged at the top of the staircase, ascending step by step. Elrond of Rivendell. Galadriel, Lady of Lothlorien. Saruman the White of Isengard. Just their presence sent tremors through the tower, and even the eye wavered in unease. Who dares interfere? Hissed an orc captain below. Without waiting for Sauron's reply, he barked an order, rallying a dozen or so warriors to surround the intruders. Galadriel didn't raise her voice. If you value your lives, leave now. The orc chieftain laughed, snarling through crooked teeth. Let's see who dies first. With a roar, he charged forward. Galadriel lifted her hand. Boom! A shockwave burst forth. The sky trembled. Even the thick black clouds overhead rippled like a disturbed lake. In an instant, the orcs charging toward her were crushed into fine dust. Not even their armor remained. Just a pile of shimmering ash. Galadriel's warnings were never exaggerated. When she said destroy, she meant obliterate. No one spared a glance for the dead orcs. The Nazgul emerged from the shadows, their spectral forms clashing with the trio. Curses, dark magic, and mental attacks rained down, but one by one, the threats were dismantled with grace and power. Their shadowy bodies were torn apart, only to reform moments later near Sauron. "You cannot defeat me," Sauron roared. Releasing his full power, darkness surged from the tower, blanketing all of Dol Guldur in choking black. The pressure spread like a plague. Outside the tower, Radagast the Brown flinched as the air thickened. A chill ran down his spine. But the one who reacted most intensely was Saruman. His eyes widened as he watched Sauron's display. He said nothing, but inside his thoughts burned. This is what I've been searching for." Darkness swallowed all light until a different radiance began to rise. Galadriel glowed with a light that was not her own, cold, majestic, and terrifyingly beautiful. The starlight of Eärendil, born from a Silmaril, erupted from her. That ancient light, pure and undying, was the natural enemy of all shadow. Sauron's power faltered beneath its brilliance. And just like that, the battle was decided. Sauron retreated, banished once more to his fortress in Mordor. For now, the world was safe from his reach. The ring, still unaware of its master's setback, continued to whisper, tempting the hobbit who carried it. "Hey Bilbo, I brought some milk. Want a glass?" "Thanks, Eric, I could use a drink." Gulp, gulp, gulp. Bilbo downed the milk in one go and let out a satisfied sigh. "Ah, that hit the spot. I feel great, way more awake. Milk really is good for you. I should drink it more often." "Glad to hear it." The dragon's chest puffed slightly in satisfaction. "Indeed, I am the great Smaug, and you are either very foolish or very brave to crawl into my lair like this. So tell me, little morsel, was it gold you came for, power, or did someone offer you up as a sacrifice to keep me entertained?" Smaug's tail shifted behind him with a sound like grinding boulders. The beast was in no rush. He was curious. Eric kept his voice casual, even as his fingers worked behind his back, silently crafting a pressure plate from the materials stored in his inventory. "Honestly, I thought you were dead, or maybe just snoring through a few centuries. The world's been pretty quiet on the dragon front lately." Smaug narrowed his other eye. "I was sleeping, yes, quite comfortably, until someone awoke me with a tempting offer. Care to guess?" "Not particularly." That, of course, made Smaug even more eager to tell him. "He offered me dominion over the northern realms," Smaug said, pride dripping from his voice. "He promised that darkness would rise again, that I would be king. The true king under the mountain." "Funny," Eric said with a small grin. "I thought that title belonged to a dwarf." "That did it?" Smaug reared his head with a deep snarl, wings twitching. The stone walls trembled. "Look at me, insect. Who else commands such fire? Who else rules from beneath the earth with a glance? Say it." Eric looked up, not at the snarling maw but at the dragon's chest. His eyes locked onto something small, something gleaming. A diamond wedged into a hollow just above the heart. A missing scale. "You're tall," Eric offered blandly. "Very majestic." Smaug actually looked pleased. "Ha, at last, some recognition. Say a few more kind things." "I might consider not turning you to ash. Do not imagine you can fight me. I have slain armies, heroes, kings. That was when I was young. My scales were still soft then. Now I am untouchable. My hide is harder than dwarven steel. My fangs can shear stone. My claws rake granite. My tail crushes towers, and my wings blot out the sky. My breath is death itself." Eric nodded along like a wizard humoring an overly talkative hippogriff trainer. Then the dragon tilted its head. "And you, human, what is your name?" Eric didn't miss a beat. "You can call me Steve." He wasn't about to give his real name to a dragon. Not here, not in Middle-earth. A name wasn't just a name in a place like this. Dragons had magic, old magic. Enchantment clung to their words like ivy to stone. Names could bind you, especially when offered freely to a creature like Smaug. "Steve," the dragon repeated, unimpressed. "Never heard of you." "Oh, I've got dozens more. You wouldn't remember them all, even if I started listing." Smaug stared at him hard. There was magic in that gaze too, but it wasn't working. The human wasn't trembling, he wasn't even sweating. He was eating. Smaug blinked in disbelief. Eric casually tore off a chunk of bread and munched, sipping from a glowing vial between bites. Right there, in the path of a dragon. That was it, the final straw, insulting, unforgivable. Smaug's chest flared, the inferno gathered behind his teeth. Just as the dragon's jaws parted to end the pest once and for all, Eric shouted and moved. A blur of motion and steel. His sword crashed down on the dragon's snout. Clang, the sound was like thunder trapped in a bottle. Smaug's head recoiled. The great beast stumbling back as the impact rattled through his skull and into the stone. He smashed into the wall behind with a crash. That shook the mountain. Eric lowered his sword, its edge glowing red. -2, 998 out of 1000 HP. Thick hide, Eric muttered, shaking out his wrist. Even thicker skull. Good news, Smaug had a health bar. Bad news, it might as well have been decorative. Smaug's voice exploded from the dust and fire. You little worm. His chest lit up again, blazing like a furnace. The roar that followed cracked the ceiling. Fire poured through the corridor, hotter than anything before. The flames consumed the space, warping air, melting stone. There was nowhere to run. When the flames finally died down, silence followed. A shape stepped through the smoke. Eric, his armor hissed with steam. But the metal felt cool to the touch. Smaug stared. Impossible. That blast wasn't just physical heat. It carried ancient magic, a smoldering curse. Meant to reduce even enchanted bones to ash. And it didn't leave a scratch. Eric grinned. You think that was impressive? He stepped back. One heel landed directly on the pressure plate he'd placed earlier. Click. From deep beneath the floor came the sound of fuses igniting. What's that sound? Smaug muttered, eyes narrowing. He twisted, searching. Eric was gone. A narrow tunnel had opened behind where he stood. A fresh one. Barely wide enough for a man. The last thing Smaug saw was a flick of a boot vanishing around a bend. You hole-digging rat. The dragon snarled, his fury climbing to a boiling point. He had been touched, staggered. A human had landed a blow. The shame of it smoldered hotter than fire. Get back here. His bellow shook loose an avalanche of dust. He reared back, flames rising in his throat once more. Then the TNT went off. Boom. Chapter 74, The Mountain Trembles. Boom, then the ground exploded. A deafening blast shattered the stone floor, tearing open a hole several meters wide. TNT blocks, dozens of them, shot up from the pit like fireworks, scattering in all directions with wild, chaotic energy. Some detonated immediately, bursting into flame and shrapnel that sent Smaug stumbling with a growl. Others ricocheted across the hall, embedding in walls or ceilings before erupting, dislodging enormous chunks of rock that hammered down on his head and wings. One rather enthusiastic TNT block embedded itself directly in the dragon's back and went off with a flash and bang that left his vision swimming. HRAGHHAHHH. With stone crashing around him and blasts erupting from all directions, Smaug finally curled in on himself. He folded his wing membranes in tight. He dropped low to the ground, coiling his body protectively. The assault had driven him into a full defensive posture. Meanwhile, tucked away safely behind a stone wall in the meeting chamber, Eric listened closely, his face inches from the rock, trying to catch every sound. The explosions didn't last long. Truth be told, his entire stockpile of TNT only amounted to a few bundles. It had looked like a lot in his inventory, but once placed down, it barely covered a modest patch of floor. Still, the chaos it caused was more than respectable. Is it over? Eric crept back through the tunnel he'd dug, poking his head out just far enough to survey the wreckage. The hall was now a disaster zone. Craters pocked the floor. Broken pillars and shattered masonry littered the ground. Scorch marks and gouges marred the stone walls, and at several spots, it looked like a wrecking ball the size of a wagon had slammed through. Where's the dragon? He climbed out, stepping lightly over fallen stone, and drew a torch from his belt to illuminate the area. The flickering flame revealed a small hill of rubble ahead, oddly shaped and moving. The mound of stone shifted slightly, subtle but rhythmic. Almost like something breathing beneath it. Eric's instincts screamed at him. He took 3 rapid steps backward until his heel touched the edge of the tunnel. Crash, RAAH, revenge, vengeance. The stone pile erupted like a volcano. Massive boulders were hurled into the air as Smaug's vast form exploded from beneath the debris. He roared with unholy rage, wings snapping open, eyes alight with fury. Death, All of you will die, treacherous humans. I will bring death to your kind." Thud, the maddened dragon hurled himself at a wall, the impact making the entire mountain quake. Even on the far side of the chamber, Eric stumbled, nearly losing his balance. Thud, thud, the blows came in steady, furious rhythm. Smaug slammed his bulk against the wall again and again, determined to smash through. Yet no matter how hard he struck, the wall refused to yield. "What?" Smaug finally stopped, eyes narrowing. This wasn't just a wall. If it were only a few meters thick, it should have crumbled by now. No, this was something else entirely. This felt ancient, immovable. It wasn't a wall, it was a piece of the mountain itself. "You're wasting your energy," came a voice from the far side. At the small 2-meter-high tunnel entrance, Smaug spotted the very human who had dared to attack him. Without hesitation, he spewed fire, determined to silence the man before he could speak another word. But when the flames cleared, the figure was still there. Completely unscathed, leaning against the wall as if enjoying a warm breeze. Crack! Smaug lunged with a sudden snap of his jaws, but Eric ducked aside in time. With a swift counterstrike, he smacked the dragon's snout with the flat of his sword, sending Smaug's head lurching sideways. It made a loud noise, sure, but barely did any damage, more irritating than painful. Eric winced. The TNT had been flashy, but in truth, it had done next to nothing. Not a single dragon scale had been broken. The blasts had looked impressive, but the total damage barely reached triple digits. For a beast the size of a fortress, with armor tougher than anything short of netherite, TNT might as well have been party crackers. Even standing near a blast wasn't much of a threat to Eric himself. Unless you were right at the center, the damage was negligible. He'd struck Smaug on the head just now with all his strength, 18 points of damage, and barely scratched him. Forget scratching. The health bar hadn't even twitched. This dragon's defense was off the charts. If he could harvest some of those scales, he could probably craft the strongest armor set in history. Still, while Eric was drooling at the thought of materials, he also felt a headache forming. If TNT wasn't enough, he'd have to bring out the big guns. Or at least something equally ridiculous. He muttered, "Looks like I'll need either redstone science or a really dirty trick." Sadly, his science was lacking for now. So dirty tricks it was. "You can't trap me forever, filthy human Steve," Smaug bellowed, practically spitting the name. "The Dark Lord's army is already on the move. They will come for me, and when they do, it will be the end of you all. I have memorized your scent. I will hunt you to the ends of the world. You cannot hide. Not from me, not ever. Forever, forever." Boom, the mountain groaned again. Far away in a narrow cell in Lake Town, Bard jerked awake, blinking through the barred window. What was that? The town outside was lively as always. No one seemed to notice the distant rumble, or if they did, they didn't care. They had lived near the mountain for decades. Nothing bad had ever really happened. Why should it start now? Clank, clank, Bard rattled the cell door, his face tight with anxiety. "Did you hear that?" he asked the guards, back near the lonely mountain, deep in a hidden path behind the cliff face. A group of dwarves had suddenly stopped in their tracks. "I heard it," Balin murmured, placing his ear against the stone. That sound came from deep within the mountain. Thud, Balin flinched and jerked away. That one nearly ruptured my eardrum. Thud, small rocks tumbled down around them. The earth trembled. "What's going on in there? It's the dragon. It must be awake. What are we going to do now? Are we too late?" Panic began to ripple through the company. Smaug was awake. That changed everything. "Silence!" Thorin roared. His shout cut through the fear like a blade. The others quieted, though their eyes still flicked about nervously. Thorin's heart was hammering in his chest. But he forced himself to stand tall. Even if your knees shake, a king must not falter. "We still have time. We've come too far to turn back now. We've crossed half the world, faced trolls, orcs, storms, and worse. Are we going to stop here? All because we're scared of one dragon? We are the sons of Durin. Our goal is the halls of Erebor. Our purpose is the restoration of our home. We will not turn back until that goal is met. Not even death will stop us." Balin was the first to step forward, voice firm. "We have never doubted you, Thorin." "We are with you," said another. "To the end." "But what is happening in there?" someone asked. "We can't charge in blind." Thorin nodded slowly, then turned to Killy. Killy, the map and key are yours for now. Stay here, I'm going to see for myself what's happening. He handed over the artifacts and turned toward the base of the mountain. Wait, where are you going? Killy called after him, clutching the key. To the front gate, the sounds came from that direction. I'll find out what's going on. With his sword tight at his hip, Thorin strode off alone. This so-called king, without a throne, had spent years tormented by dreams of reclaiming his homeland. Now that it was finally within reach, he would not let it slip away. Bilbo reached into his pocket, fingers brushing the cold ring. Thorin, I can, but before he could finish, the other dwarves stepped forward, forming a line of solidarity. We'll go with you. They moved to stand at Thorin's side, placing Bilbo safely in the middle. Whatever awaits us, we'll face it together. Victory or death, there is no third choice. Chapter 75, Attrition. Almost there, no one make a sound. At the front gates of the lonely mountain, Thorin crept forward, leading the company of dwarves. With deliberate steps and hushed breaths. The path was familiar to him, etched into memory from years of longing. I remember this road. Follow me, he whispered, stepping carefully. Wait, what's that hole? One of the dwarves asked, pointing at a strange, unnatural-looking tunnel in the wall. Thorin's brow furrowed. That wasn't here before. Looks kind of familiar, though. You don't think maybe we've seen this sort of thing somewhere else? Another dwarf added, squinting. Eric, let's head in, Thorin said at once, drawing his sword. Without waiting for a second opinion, he charged through the opening. Boom, the dull echoes of crashing stone and metal rumbled faintly through the halls. A dragon's snarl echoed faintly, followed by the unmistakable roar of fire erupting and dying away. That can't be good, muttered a dwarf, the pieces clicking together with dawning dread. They moved closer, drawn by the commotion, until they were stopped by a wall. Of smooth, unfamiliar stone. This wasn't here, Thorin said slowly, shaking his head. This hallway used to lead straight to the cellars. There was never a wall, especially not this color. It's the same color as Eric's castle walls, Boffer noted grimly. Check that puddle, exactly 2 meters by 2 meters. Pretty clear who made it, another dwarf said. As he dipped a finger into the water, it sparkled unnaturally clean, like something from an elven fountain. Over here, another passage. The moment someone spotted another tunnel, all attention shifted. The dwarves gathered around its mouth. One brave soul leaned in. Darkness swallowed the tunnel beyond, with only the faintest light glinting off what looked like loose rubble at the end. Should we go in? Thorin nodded and stepped forward. Suddenly, a flash of red light flared deep within the tunnel. His instincts screamed. Thorin dove aside and bellowed, back! Whoosh! A wall of fire burst from the tunnel, then vanished just as fast. One unlucky dwarf who moved a second too late found his beard a little crispier than before. You can't kill me, the furious roar of the dragon thundered from inside. The cavern trembled under its rage. That's Smog, Thorin gasped. He couldn't wait any longer. Move with me. The dwarves surged forward. Thwip! A flaming arrow whizzed through the air and struck Smog square in the eye. It bounced off with a dull clink. The dragon barely blinked. Flaming arrows, fire-aspected weapons, none of it worked. Of course not. It was a fire dragon. Shooting fire at Smog was like trying to drown a fish. And as Smog had so helpfully reminded them in one of his many monologues, his scales were tougher than 10-layer dwarven plate armor. The game stats would call it something like armor rating, overkill. The only weakness was the missing scale over his heart. And despite Eric having worn out half the bow's durability, the enchanted diamond embedded in that scale hadn't so much as wobbled. You startled me for a moment, Steve. For a second there, I almost mistook you for a warrior of the elder days, Smog sneered mid-battle. You might know a few clever tricks, but compared to those heroes, you're barely a squire. And that sword, it's decent, I suppose. Shame it's in your hands. You don't even have half the strength of the last man I killed wielding one like it. The dragon rambled, tossing snide remarks as casually as it hurled fire. His trash talk was relentless, and it was clear he wasn't just trying to insult, he was trying to break Eric's focus. If I were you, I'd shut that scaly trap before I ram this sword so deep down your throat you'll be whistling iron forever, Eric shot back. letting another fire-tipped arrow fly. Smaug caught it between his teeth, chewed once, and swallowed. Tastes like chicken, got any more? Eric nearly threw his bow at him in frustration. Clang! He slammed his sword down on Smaug's claw with a resounding crack. The dragon recoiled, actually hissing in pain. "You insolent little..." And just like that, the fight was back on. Steel clashed with claw, and the corridor echoed with the chaos of war. Since Smaug had realized Eric was completely immune to fire, the dragon had mostly abandoned his flaming breath, only letting it loose occasionally out of habit. Instead, he focused on physical combat, charging, swiping, biting. His ivory fangs glinted like blades, his claws sharp as spears. One powerful bite even dented Eric's armor and dropped his health bar a smidge. Still, Eric wasn't in serious danger. Smaug's blows were heavy, but nowhere near the crushing power of Sauron's. With a little sidestepping and a couple loaves of lembas, Eric could keep himself topped off. Smaug, however, wasn't regenerating anything. His health bar ticked down in slow, stubborn slivers, barely noticeable unless you were really paying attention. It was a battle of attrition, and Eric was winning. All he had to do was hold out, maybe trap Smaug's retreat. That would seal the deal. Easier said than done, though. "I'll admit it, you have some skill," Smaug growled, now circling cautiously, changing tactics. Gone was the reckless fury. Now he was playing smart, darting in and out, hitting from angles, keeping Eric guessing. Smaug wasn't some programmed boss with a single attack pattern. He could think, he could adapt. When brute force didn't work, he switched to trickery, psychology, even dragon magic. He peppered Eric with muttered incantations and mind games, trying to distract and demoralize. So far, it wasn't working. But it wasn't for lack of effort. "My king, am I dreaming?" Just then, a new group stumbled into the edge of the fray, dwarves, lots of them, and one very bewildered hobbit. Eric's fighting that giant dragon, and they're evenly matched. The company of dwarves stood frozen, stunned all over again by Eric's absurd power. He just got stronger the more danger he faced. His actual combat ability was now anyone's guess. Bilbo stood gaping, jaw slack, words utterly failed him. Well, all but one dwarf. Forget that, why in Durin's name did he wake the beast in the first place? We were supposed to sneak in. Steal the gem and raise an army, not pick a fight with the dragon. Thorin's voice was filled with disbelief and fury. Their entire plan had just gone up in smoke. Literal smoke. "Well, well, what do we have here?" Smaug sniffed the air. "Ah, the sweet scent of dwarf, delightful." Eric's eyes widened. He turned sharply. There they were, all huddled near the tunnel mouth like a bunch of startled marmots. "Back! Get back!" Right as he shouted, a column of fire blasted toward them. To their credit, the dwarves reacted fast. They yanked Bilbo down and dove in every direction, rolling, scrambling, dodging in ways that would have made a cat burglar proud. It wasn't graceful, but it worked. "Move!" Eric slapped a bucket of water against the wall. Instantly, the enchanted water stretched out and cascaded down like a curtain, forming a shimmering veil of protection. He herded the dwarves behind it, dragging them back toward the council chamber, away from the inferno. Chapter 76, A Violent Rescue. "What are you doing here?" The vast meeting hall echoed with tension. On one side of the wall, Smaug was still roaring insults at them, calling them cowardly worms, but no one paid the dragon any attention. The focus of the company had shifted. A private council had formed in the corner of the chamber. "That's my question, Eric," Thorin growled, arms crossed. "What in Mahal's name are you doing here? You weren't supposed to charge in recklessly and wake the dragon. That's not what we agreed on. You've risked the entire quest, my father's key and the map wasted." Eric merely shook his head. "No, Thorin, the plan was doomed from the start. Your information is out of date." "What? Smaug's already made a deal with our true enemy. Remember that necromancer Gandalf mentioned? The one gathering power in the east? That's Sauron, Lord of Darkness." He let that sink in before continuing. "Smaug isn't asleep. He's been wide awake the whole time, just playing dead, waiting for you to walk in like lambs to the slaughter." Thorin's angry expression faltered, morphing into disbelief. Eric pressed on. "What's worse, a massive army of orcs and wargs has united under Sauron's banner." They've already begun marching from Moria and the Misty Mountains, tens of thousands strong. Their goal? To crown Smaug as the new king under the mountain and seize this entire region. No, Thorin shouted, slamming a fist on the table. I am the rightful king under the mountain, which is exactly why we need a new plan, Eric replied calmly. Thorin took a deep breath, absorbing the heavy truth. If the dragon's already awakened, then we face it head-on. The original plan is scrapped. We kill it before the orcs arrive. Otherwise, there's no saving this mountain. I'll also send word to our kin for reinforcements. He turned quickly to one of his companions. Balin, do you remember how to make blast charges? Balin scratched his beard thoughtfully. It's been a while. But if you take me to the forge, I think I can recall the process. Excellent. We'll lure Smaug into the furnace chamber, set up the explosives to draw him in. Then flood the place with molten gold. Once it cools, he'll be frozen solid, crushed under his own greed. The dwarves muttered in agreement. It was a long shot. But better than charging in blindly. Eric, however, frowned. That won't work. Thorin turned sharply. What? I already tried magma. It only irritated him. To Smaug, it's like soaking in a hot bath. He'll crawl out before it even hardens. Thorin scowled. Then, what do you suggest? Let him link up with the orcs and prance around calling himself king. Calm down, Balin interjected. There may be another way. Thorin narrowed his eyes. We're listening. There's an old tale about the fall of Dale, Balin began slowly. They say the last Lord of Dale shot Smaug during the attack. He didn't kill him, but he did knock off one of the scales covering the dragon's heart. If we could find another black arrow and strike the same spot again, we could kill him. Balin looked at Eric. Well, Eric gave a faint, almost reluctant smile. It's true, I saw it myself. There's a bare patch right over his heart, no scale there. If you can hit that, you've got a real chance. But the Lord of Dale's long dead, one of the dwarves objected. Where are we going to find another legendary archer? Oh, we've already met him, Balin said, eyes twinkling. The dwarves exchanged surprised glances. You mean that man is Bard, the bargeman from Laketown? Thorin's expression grew thoughtful. He turned toward Eric once more. Will you stay and keep watch on the dragon while we go? We'll be back in a few days at most. Eric nodded. I'll be here. That noisy lizard won't be going anywhere. Also, you mentioned the forge. Is it stocked with powder? It is, Balin confirmed. Do you need some? No need for a full tour, just tell me the direction. Balin blinked. Just straight west, 300 paces through the mountain. Eric rolled his shoulders. Much faster to dig my way through than take the scenic route. Once the directions were given, and with no further questions, the dwarves departed in haste. Bilbo hesitated, casting a glance back at Eric, but then hurried after Thorin and the others. They needed him more right now. Laketown, outside the prison. Ulfrid leaned casually against the jailhouse wall, peering through the barred window with a sneer. Look at you, Bard, once a beloved man of the people, now rotting in a cell. They used to cheer for you, trust you. And what did you do in return? Teamed up with burglars, helped them steal from the town. He twirled the cell keys dramatically in his hand, letting the metal jangle in Bard's face. The people will curse your name. Your little revolution is over. Bard's hands tightened on the bars, his eyes cold. The only plot here is yours. This entire arrest was nothing more than a convenient excuse to get rid of him. He'd known it was coming. Ulfrid chuckled and turned to leave. Well, enjoy your stay, hero. This is your final chapter. Thwack, a dull blow sounded from behind him. Ulfrid froze mid-step, eyes rolling back as he collapsed like a sack of potatoes. Click. The lock turned. Bard looked down in confusion and saw a group of dwarves staring back at him. Weapons drawn. Bard, heir of Girion, last Lord of Dale, you now have a chance to restore your family's legacy. Will you take it? It was Balin who spoke, the most diplomatic among them. He'd been pushed forward to make the pitch. Then, pushing through the crowd, a boy ran up and threw himself into Bard's arms. Father, Bane, Bard was stunned. He knelt and hugged his son tightly. What are you doing here? They came to rescue you, but they needed someone to show the way. Bard's eyes flicked to Balin, who nodded warmly. Your son's remarkable. Brave, clever. He's kept your home safe, remembered your prison cell's location, and didn't hesitate once. Bard looked between his son and the group of armed dwarves, expression unreadable. After a moment, he sighed. I suppose I don't really have a choice, do I? Chapter 77, Stockpiling. The prison door slammed shut once again. Ulfrid, still unconscious, was unceremoniously tossed inside. Before leaving, the dwarves stuffed the window with rubbish to block the view from outside. Perfect. The group snuck back to Bard's house and retrieved the black arrow. This thing's basically a giant spear. No ordinary bow is going to launch it. We'll need the wind lance in the town square, Bard said, lifting his eyes toward the distant tower. The dwarves followed his gaze. That's a real war machine, one of them muttered. I can tell just by looking. Wait, are we planning to bring the dragon here? Someone asked in alarm. No, that would bring too much destruction to Lake Town, Bard replied firmly. So, borrow the weapon from the master of the town. Bard gave them a look. Given how the people feel about him these days, do you think he'll just lend us a siege weapon? Honestly, a dwarf scoffed, what kind of idiots are running this place? I say we take it, another grinned. Exactly, grab it and go. Let's move. Wait, Bard cut in quickly, waving his hands. That tower is guarded, heavily. We wait till night, he explained. Only a few patrols then, and there's usually a long gap between them. We'll have time to move it. No time for that, Bard, Thorin said gravely. We can wait. The dragon can't. Right now it's down there dreaming of roasting this entire town. The sooner the better, and no number of guards can stop a determined dwarf, Bard sighed. Fine, let's do it. Without wasting another moment, and using the route Bard provided, the group slipped through Lake Town's alleys until they reached the base of the tower where the wind lance was kept. Locals eyed them with curiosity, especially when they saw Bard among them. Bard, weren't you in prison? SHHH, I've got something important to do. The townsfolk exchanged glances, then, as if a silent agreement passed among them, began helping. Guards incoming. Oh no, my fruit stall. One resident gave a dramatic yelp and accidentally toppled their entire display into the street just as a patrol approached. Oh dear, how long will this take to clean up? I'll help. People rushed over, crowding the scene with helpful chaos. Minutes stretched on. The guards grumbled, trying to squeeze past, but the mess just never seemed to clear. By the time they forced their way through the crowd, the dwarves were long gone. Inside the watchtower, 2 unconscious guards had been dragged into hay bales and concealed. The dwarves had already climbed the stairs. But how are we supposed to carry this thing? Bard whispered, staring at the wind lance, massive and reinforced with dwarven steel. Ha, you underestimate dwarves, one of them laughed. This was built with our craftsmanship. We know exactly how to take it apart. This particular company, though hardy, wasn't made up of warriors alone. Many were smiths and artisans. And tonight, that proved far more useful. The massive ballista was carefully taken apart into manageable pieces, which the dwarves secured to their backs with practiced efficiency. Let's move, someone shouted as they prepared to leave. Back at the prison, someone was pounding furiously on the locked door, demanding to be released immediately. Open up, I said, open this door, the voice shouted angrily from inside. A patrolling guard yelled back through the door, shut it, you're not getting out unless the master says so. You fools, you don't even recognize Lake Town's deputy when he's been locked up. Get me out this instant, the prisoner roared. The guards exchanged confused glances, then one poked at the trash, blocking the barred window to peer inside. Sure enough, there was a very swollen but familiar face scowling up at them from within the cell. The door swung open instantly as the guards realized their mistake and rushed to free the deputy. Quick, Bard has escaped. That treasonous archer is on the loose, the deputy commanded as he emerged. Lake Town erupted into chaotic activity, with patrols mobilizing and search parties running in every direction through the streets. The streets echoed with the sound of boots and shouted orders as guards searched desperately for the escaped prisoner. But Bard was nowhere to be found, despite the extensive search efforts throughout the entire town. The guards found themselves facing obstacle after obstacle as they searched, including toppled flower pots blocking walkways everywhere. Fishing nets mysteriously tangled in alleys, while ropes, buckets, and carts appeared in the worst possible places. At every turn, something slowed them down. making the search increasingly difficult and frustrating for the guards. By nightfall, not a single trace of Bard had been found anywhere in Lake Town or the surrounding areas. He and the dwarves were already long gone, safely traveling far away from the town by that time. On the road out of Lake Town, Balin chatted quietly with Bard as they marched steadily toward Erebor together. "I must admit, I underestimated your influence, Bard," Balin said with genuine respect in his voice. "With your reputation, you could probably dethrone that master without lifting a finger. The people would do it for you." "Maybe," Bard muttered with a distant gaze, not entirely convinced by Balin's assessment of the situation. The dragon-slaying weapon was now on its way to the Lonely Mountain, carried carefully by the traveling group. But Eric wasn't betting everything on one arrow, no matter how legendary it was supposed to be. A single shot to the heart was ideal, but if that failed, they would definitely need alternative plans. Using the directions Thorin gave him, Eric quietly tunneled his way into the forges beneath the mountain itself. He managed to reach the forges right under Smaug's snout, without alerting the massive dragon to his presence. "Oh, hello, beautiful," he whispered as he surveyed the magnificent workshop before him with growing excitement. The room was a dwarf's dream, filled with stockpiles of materials, half-finished weapons, and tools scattered everywhere. Eric looked like a cat that had fallen into a barrel of fish oil, completely overwhelmed by possibilities. Recipe unlocked, flameburst bomb. He grinned widely as he examined some of the leftover casings and unfinished explosives lying around the forge. Even as scrap, they were enough to unlock the crafting recipe for this new and useful weapon type. The flameburst bomb wasn't nearly as strong as TNT, only dealing about 8 points of damage with small radius. But it had significant perks that made it valuable, including the ability to throw it without complicated setup. It could be thrown without placing or fuse time. You just lob it and boom, instant explosion on impact. Even better, it came with a special effect that inflicted blindness on anyone looking at the detonation point. Anyone staring at it when it detonated would be flash-blinded for several seconds, long enough to reposition or escape. It was also long enough to stab something very large in a soft spot during their temporary blindness. In short, it was Middle-earth's answer to a flashbang grenade from modern military arsenals back home. Eric tossed a few into his inventory, then cracked open another supply crate to see what else was available. Sulfur, saltpeter, charcoal, fully mixed powder, even paper. Yes, actual paper was stored in these supply crates. They say paper can't cover fire, but it can definitely wrap gunpowder quite effectively for explosive purposes. With a mischievous grin, Eric got to work crafting as many explosives as he possibly could from available materials. By the end of the hour, he had a full stack of TNT and a dozen flameburst bombs ready. He even crafted a few experimental fireworks for morale reasons, though their practical use remained to be seen. Chapter 78, The Plan. Sometimes things seem useless only because no one's figured out how to use them properly or creatively enough. Take fireworks, for example, which most people think of only as celebratory decorations without any practical applications whatsoever. In my world, fireworks actually cause damage. The problem is they're usually shot into the sky far away. They're fired far away from anything they might actually hit, making them seem harmless and purely decorative to most. But there's a fix for that trajectory problem, a way to control their flight path and targeting precisely. Enter the crossbow, a simple but effective solution to the fireworks directional control problem that changes everything completely. Load a firework into a crossbow, and it'll fly straight in the direction you aim with remarkable accuracy. It only explodes when it hits something or reaches its maximum range, making it a controllable explosive projectile weapon. The damage from that explosion depends on how many firework stars, or in simpler terms, how much gunpowder you pack. Maxed out, a firework can hit for over 10 points of damage, rivaling a fully enchanted bow in raw power. The difference is that fireworks explode in a radius, making them more effective in the right combat conditions. Against unarmored soft targets, they could be pretty deadly, causing widespread damage to multiple enemies at once simultaneously. But against a dragon with armor thicker than netherite, their effectiveness was questionable at best and needed testing. "Are you celebrating my inevitable victory?" Smaug rumbled dryly, his voice echoing through the stone chambers with amusement. "You sure talk a lot for someone being tested on," Eric replied casually, not intimidated by the dragon's words. Eric holstered the flame-burst bomb and his firework-loaded crossbow, then drew his sword with a smooth, practiced motion. He gave Smaug's claw a polite slice to test his weapons, and the dragon's roar echoed through the corridors. Eric slipped back out of the narrow tunnel quickly, as Smaug's furious roar shook dust from the ceiling above. Test log, fireworks. Damage, comparable to a maxed-out enchanted bow. Like flare rounds, they deal area of effect damage to multiple targets. Materials, more expensive than flame-burst bombs, requiring significantly more gunpowder and stars to craft each rocket effectively. Effectiveness, unable to pierce dragon scales, but judging by Smaug's reaction, he definitely felt it, not entirely useless after all. Best suited for lightly armored targets like orcs or wargs that can't withstand explosive area damage very well. Range depends on powder load, anywhere from 30 to 70 meters, not amazing range but definitely usable in combat. Field deployment could be devastating in volleys. Imagine an entire squad firing fireworks at once in coordinated attacks together. Meanwhile, in the long hall behind the treasure chamber, Smaug was glaring intently at a 2-block-high tunnel entrance closely. It was the same tunnel entrance that his annoying human pest kept using to escape from him repeatedly. This time, he had a plan to finally catch the irritating intruder who kept poking him with weapons. He'd stacked up some hefty chunks of rubble near the entrance, preparing his trap with draconic cunning and patience. Next time the human showed his face, the dragon was going to plug that hole before he could bolt away. Unfortunately for Smaug, Eric had the exact same idea about blocking exits, just flipped in the opposite direction entirely. While the dragon was plotting to trap him, Eric was busy mining through the rear of the long hall. He was sealing off every exit Smaug might use to flee back to his treasure hoard or escape the mountain. It took less than a day to complete the task of blocking all of Smaug's potential escape routes completely. By the time Eric returned to the meeting hall armed to the teeth, Smaug was unknowingly trapped inside completely. The way back to his beloved gold hoard was gone, blocked off by carefully placed stone and debris barriers. Eric cracked his neck and prepared to walk into the fight of his life against the now-cornered boss monster. Just as he was about to enter, a bunch of dwarves came crashing through the entrance huffing and puffing heavily. They were very nearly collapsing from exhaustion as they stumbled into the hall, desperate to stop Eric immediately. "Wait, hold it, don't go in there yet," one of the dwarves shouted breathlessly, waving his arms frantically. "There's no need, just give us a minute," another dwarf added, gasping for air between his urgent words. The music of the moment took an unexpected twist as the dwarves finally arrived at their destination. "Hugh, we made it, Eric. Ha, looks like we got here just in time," Balin gasped breathlessly. The dwarves dumped a pile of clanking components onto the ground, before flopping down like exhausted sacks of potatoes. Several of them reached for their canteens immediately, guzzling water like they'd crossed a vast desert without stopping. Bomber went one better. He lay down next to Eric's infinite water source and started chugging straight from it. He was nearly falling in head first when Eric grabbed the barrel-shaped dwarf by the collar to stop him. "Hey, take it easy," Eric said as he yanked Bomber back before he could drown himself in the pool. "I'm impressed. Honestly, I thought you'd take a few more days. I was already working out how to season dragon meat." "Since we left, we haven't stopped for a second, not even to sleep," Balin wheezed, still catching his breath. To be fair, dwarves weren't built for marathons, so their rapid arrival was truly impressive given their physical limitations. If they had been sprinting since the moment they left, it was a miracle they weren't dead from exhaustion. Even Thorin, the strongest among them, looked too tired to grumble or complain about anything at this point. "Well, we couldn't let you do everything now, could we?" Balin said with a tired but genuine grin. "Besides, we brought the one thing that might actually kill that lizard. You're going to like this," he added. the dwarves parted to reveal a tall human man with a stern expression and a longbow slung over back. In his hand was a massive black arrow nearly the size of a spear, clearly a weapon of legend. Well, look at that, Eric thought to himself. They'd apparently kidnapped a person along the way to help. "You're the famous warrior, Eric?" the man asked with a direct and measuring gaze upon him now. Eric raised a brow with curiosity and replied, "You've heard of me," wondering how his reputation had spread. "We haven't met," the man replied calmly, "but I've heard tales about you from various sources over time. Refugees from the river valleys passed through Lake Town months ago, and they spoke of a black-armored knight," he explained. "They say you fought orcs and wargs alone wielding a flaming sword, saving settlements on both sides of Anduin." "I'm Bard of Lake Town. It's an honor," the man said formally, introducing himself with a respectful bow. Bard gave a formal bow, clearly surprised that the dwarves were friends with such a legendary warrior figure. It would have helped if they had mentioned that earlier, might have saved us both a trip, Bard thought privately. Although Bard didn't particularly like dwarves, he could respect anyone who had risked his life to protect innocent others. "Likewise, Bard," Eric said respectfully. "I'm guessing you already know why we're here. The dragon is through that tunnel." He pointed toward the far wall, where the tunnel entrance led deeper into the mountain towards Smaug's lair. Bard took a step toward it with curiosity piqued, wanting to see the legendary beast for himself firsthand. "I wouldn't get too close," Eric warned seriously. "The dragon's got a foul mouth, keep your distance for clean ears." Smaug was still shouting obscenities from within the tunnel. The beast had stamina and endurance, no doubt about that. "So what's the plan?" Bard asked professionally. "We set up the windlass and shoot it straight through the heart." "We've only got one shot," someone muttered nervously from the group. "It has to count, no room for error." Everyone turned to look at Bard expectantly, knowing he would be the one taking the critical dragon-slaying shot. "I'll take the shot," he said calmly without hesitation, his voice steady and confident despite the enormous pressure. There wasn't a hint of fear in his eyes. To him, this was just another hunt, bigger prey. Eric studied him for a moment, then nodded with approval, recognizing true courage when he saw it before him. Bard wasn't just brave. He was the kind of man who would stand alone against a dragon to protect people. He would face the dragon, even if all he had was a wooden bow. Such was his dedication and courage. "I've got a plan," Thorin spoke up suddenly after catching his breath and recovering from the exhausting journey here. He was now pointing to a section of the map spread on the table, showing a specific tactical location. "There's a narrow passage just beyond the long hall where we can set up our trap," Thorin explained carefully. "If we lure the dragon and he'll have to expose his chest to squeeze through the tight passage," he continued. "Once he's inside, there's no turning back. He'll be committed to moving forward into our ambush zone completely. We set the windlass at the end of the corridor, draw him in, trap him, then let our sharpshooter work." He looked Bard in the eyes with intensity and said, "If this works, I will give you my word as king. You may ask anything of me, so long as it does not betray dwarven honor it is yours," Thorin promised. Bard held his gaze steadily, then gave a small nod of acknowledgement before replying with pointed words to him. "Then I hope you're not like your grandfather," Bard said, referencing the troubled history of Thorin's family line. Thorin flinched visibly at the mention. His hands curled into fists, but he said nothing in response to it. His face darkened with suppressed emotion, but no one in the group commented on the obvious tension between them. Soon the 13 dwarves, 2 humans, and 1 hobbit gathered in a circle to plan the ambush in detail together. Eric glanced at the map again carefully, then suddenly clapped his hands as he remembered something important to mention. "Oh right, that tunnel you're talking about. I kind of blocked it," Eric admitted casually to the group's surprise. "You what?" Thorin blinked in confusion and disbelief, not understanding why Eric would do such a strange thing. "Well, I didn't know it was part of your master plan, but don't worry, I'll just go knock it down." Thorin had a moment of confusion, until his eyes flicked to the massive stone wall Eric had built earlier. Yeah, that could definitely block it, Thorin realized, understanding now the scale of Eric's construction capabilities and methods. "Fine," Thorin muttered, deciding not to question it further since Eric could apparently fix the problem quite easily anyway. The less he tried to understand Eric's methods, the better his sanity would remain, Thorin thought to himself wisely. "There's one more thing," Eric added seriously. "We need bait to lure the dragon into the trap successfully. Someone fast, agile, able to dodge across uneven terrain, and small enough to fit through dwarf-sized tunnels easily. And since there's going to be a dragon chasing them through those tunnels," Eric continued, looking around the group. Everyone turned their attention toward Bilbo, the obvious choice given his size and agility compared to the larger group members. Bilbo looked around nervously as everyone stared at him, then sighed deeply and reluctantly stepped forward to volunteer himself. I suppose that would be," Bilbo began to say before being interrupted by Thorin's firm voice cutting through. "It'll be me," Thorin interrupted firmly, placing a hand on Bilbo's shoulder and gently shoving him back protectively. Chapter 79, Is It Over? "The dragon and I have a blood feud," Thorin said coldly, his voice filled with ancient hatred and determination. "You're not exactly tempting bait, Thorin," Bilbo muttered practically. "Smaug wouldn't fly into rage over an unknown dwarf before him. And Eric wouldn't work either," Thorin added logically. "He's strong enough to fight the beast head-on without much difficulty. If he suddenly retreats, it'll raise suspicion. The dragon would know something is wrong with the situation," Thorin explained. He stood in the center of the group with his gaze firm and unwavering, making his case clearly. "It has to be me. I am the rightful heir of Durin, the true king under the mountain," he declared. "I am the one the dragon despises most. He won't miss a chance to kill me," Thorin stated with certainty. "He'll lose control the moment he sees me," Thorin predicted, knowing the dragon's hatred for his bloodline ran deep. A glint of madness flickered in Thorin's eyes as he spoke about confronting Smaug face to face in battle. Eric saw it clearly. He didn't need to say anything aloud, but Thorin was right, yet the reverse was true. The dragon might enrage Thorin too, triggering the curse that already had its hooks deep in his mind and soul. Since they set foot in Erebor, Thorin had been teetering on the edge of madness, barely holding his sanity together. The curse that lingered on these ancient halls had already coiled around his soul like an invisible serpent, constricting slowly. Should he reclaim the throne, his greed might one day outmatch even the dragon's legendary avarice and destructive hunger for gold. "Fine," Eric thought grimly to himself. "If madness is coming, let it come in full so we can deal with it." His fists clenched tightly with determination. He had his sword ready and his potion prepared, both weapons at hand now. "Eric, your thoughts?" Thorin asked as he finished laying out the plan, a habit left over from when Gandalf was around. "Do it," Eric replied without any hesitation, agreeing immediately to Thorin's proposed strategy for confronting the dragon in battle. He pointed the others to a narrow tunnel he had secretly dug behind the corridor for their tactical positioning. From there, the dwarves swiftly moved to assemble the ballista, working together efficiently to prepare the dragon-slaying weapon quickly. Far at the end of the hidden passage, Bard stood silently staring at the refurbished windlance and black arrow. He took a few deep breaths to calm himself and steady his aim, then waited patiently for the signal. Then came the roar echoing through the mountain halls, signaling that the plan was now in motion at last. "You flame-belching maggot!" A voice bellowed from deeper inside the mountain, clearly trying to provoke the dragon's anger intentionally. Smaug's first instinct was to assume it was that wretched Steve again, the human who kept annoying him relentlessly. But when he turned his massive head, his eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed with a slow, amused grin. "Well, well, look who finally crawled out of the mines," he growled with dark satisfaction at seeing his old enemy. "If it isn't the last heir of Durin, Thorin Oakenshield," Smaug said mockingly, recognizing the dwarf prince before him immediately. "Tired of scrubbing chamber pots across Middle-earth dwarf, come back to die properly," the dragon taunted cruelly with malice. Smaug shifted his massive body, abandoning his guard post, and began slithering toward Thorin with deliberate menacing movements forward. Each step made the stones shake violently beneath his weight, but Thorin stood his ground unmoving like a statue. He was a statue forged in pride and fury, refusing to show any fear before the ancient dragon. You think dragging some mystery warrior into this mountain will change your fate? The dragon snarled at Thorin angrily. You're still the same spineless coward, Smaug roared, trying to break Thorin's resolve with his cruel insults and taunts. You talk too much, you bloated, sluggish, crusty-scaled fossil. Thorin's voice rang through the corridors like a war drum. He was in his element now, finally putting that natural gift for taunts to good use against his enemy. You're no king, no rightful ruler, just a worm in a cavern, Thorin shouted back with fierce defiance. You've stolen what you'll never understand. I am the king under the mountain, the rightful heir, he declared. And you are nothing. Thorin finished his declaration, his voice echoing with righteous anger through the mountain halls around them. Smaug let out a rumbling chuckle and said, "Did you just cough that speech up? Still steaming hot, fresh delivery." He crept forward slowly, savoring the moment of confrontation with his ancient enemy and enjoying the dwarf's bold defiance. Suddenly, a cluster of flash bombs burst across Smaug's snout, white light and clouds of dust filling the air. The dragon didn't even blink at the explosion. He barely flinched, only recoiling his neck slightly in mild annoyance. More of these pathetic toys. Come now, don't you dwarves have anything new? Smaug mocked their feeble attempts to harm him. With a guttural growl, his belly flared red as fire gathered in his throat, preparing to incinerate Thorin completely. Thorin dove around a corner just in time, sprinting toward the old forge chamber to escape the incoming flames. Smaug followed with wings tucked, preparing a scorching blast to turn the fleeing dwarf into ash and cinders. Just then Thorin shouted, "Now!" signaling the hidden dwarves to activate the next phase of their carefully coordinated trap. Hidden dwarves pulled the lever, and with a roar, cold mountain water surged from above, drenching the dragon mid-charge. The water doused his flames before they could ignite, steam pouring off his body as he hissed in frustration. "All right, now you're making me angry," Smaug growled menacingly, his patience with these tricks finally wearing completely thin. His pace quickened dramatically, massive claws gouging the walls as he chased Thorin through the corridors like a tidal wave. At the forge's end, Thorin flung 2 more flash bombs straight at the beast's eyes, distracting him once again. A large iron gate slammed shut behind Thorin as he dashed through to the next section of corridor. At that exact moment, enormous boulders crashed down from the rafters, smashing into Smaug's head with tremendous force and impact. "You think that would hurt me?" the dragon snarled defiantly. "Please, I've been through worse than your pathetic little rocks." "How has this worm survived everything?" Philly muttered from above, watching in dismay. "These were all brand new ideas we tried." Their traps barely made a dent in the dragon's armor, but Smaug was done playing games with these irritating dwarves. He rammed the gate violently, tucked his wings in and dove inside with his underbelly glowing hot with fury. One clean shot and he'd finish Thorin once and for all, ending this bloodline permanently and claiming final victory. Smaug was certain these dwarves had nothing left to throw at him, no more tricks or traps remaining now. But he missed one thing, the most important element of the ambush plan that would seal his doom completely. From the distant end of a tunnel, a whoosh of wind swept through, carrying the scent of danger ahead. The giant shadow descended as talons scraped against stone. The beast shot forward like a cannonball toward the waiting archer. Bard stood ready at his position, calm and focused despite the massive dragon bearing down on him with lethal intent. Another human? Smaug thought with confusion, not expecting a second warrior to be waiting in this ambush position here. "You think your little toys will save you?" Smaug snarled, beginning to whisper in dragon tongue to cloud this man's mind. But Bard didn't flinch at the dragon's enchanted words. His will was too strong to be broken by mere suggestions. He stared only at one spot, the faint gap in Smaug's scaled chest where a diamond had been lodged. Now it was exposed, the weak point in the dragon's otherwise impenetrable armor finally visible to the skilled archer. Smaug didn't notice the first arrow as it flew through the air toward his chest with deadly accuracy. It was a plain one, just enough to knock the diamond loose from where it had been embedded. The second came from the windlance, a massive black arrow shot like thunder toward the dragon's exposed heart. The black arrow slammed into the exposed flesh over Smaug's heart with a deep, wet crunch, piercing scales completely. "Urarrgh." The scream was guttural and wild as lava-like blood erupted from his mouth in a fountain of pain. His body jerked violently, muscles locking in agony as the legendary weapon delivered its fatal blow to him. -900 HP. 100/1000 HP remaining. Status effect: massive bleeding, life suppressed. So the black arrow was a dragon-slaying weapon. Good to know it lived up to its legendary reputation, Eric thought. Bard dove into a side shaft just as the beast came crashing down with terrifying force, narrowly escaping death. "Eric," he shouted, calling for backup as the wounded dragon thrashed about in its death throes dangerously nearby. "I'm here," Eric replied, emerging from the shadows while chugging a strength potion II for maximum combat effectiveness now. His longsword gleamed in the firelight as he prepared to deliver the finishing blows to the mortally wounded dragon. He leapt from the upper scaffolding and descended like a hawk, ready to strike at the vulnerable beast below. Smaug was barely moving, slashing feebly in blind rage despite his mortal wound and the arrow through his heart. Even dying, he was still a force of destruction. One wild strike could reduce any man to mist instantly. But none of his flailing could stop Eric's blade, as the warrior struck with precision and deadly intent repeatedly. The young warrior struck again and again, each blow finding its mark on the dragon's weakening body perfectly. His dynamic sword skill activated, each strike faster and harder than the last in a devastating escalating combo attack. The more hits landed, the stronger the next became, building momentum up to 12 strikes in total maximum damage. Smaug couldn't flee from the onslaught, couldn't regenerate from his wounds, he could only take the punishment being dealt. And Eric didn't miss a single strike, each one precise and calculated to maximize damage to the dying dragon. On the 12th strike, he drove his sword between the dragon's jawbones, piercing the skull with brutal, devastating finality. The light in Smaug's eyes dimmed as life finally left the ancient dragon's body after centuries of terror. His limbs twitched weakly one final time, then fell still as death claimed the last fire drake of Middle-earth forever. Just like that, the last fire drake of Middle-earth was dead, slain by the combined efforts of the brave warriors. Or was he truly dead? Eric wondered cautiously, watching for any signs of life from the massive corpse before him. Lines of text flickered across Eric's vision, confirming the dragon's death with achievement notifications appearing rapidly before his eyes. Achievement unlocked, Dragon Slayer. Achievement unlocked, Liberation of Erebor. Title earned, Slayer of the Fireworm. Is it over? Eric thought to himself, still processing the magnitude of what they had just accomplished together successfully. Chapter 80, New Materials. Achievement unlocked, Next Generation. Once it was certain that Smaug was truly dead, a fiery red egg suddenly materialized in Eric's inventory mysteriously. Fire Dragon Egg. Hatch near lava for best results, the item description read, providing basic instructions for the mysterious dragon egg's care. With a sharp pull, Eric withdrew the sword that had been embedded beneath the dragon's lower jaw, exhaling slowly with relief. The tension finally drained from his shoulders as he confirmed the dragon was truly dead and the battle was over. The blade shimmered even more brilliantly than before, its brilliance untouched by blood despite having just slain a dragon. From the mouth of the cavern, Bard stepped out and stared blankly at the immense corpse lying before him. The legends were true, Thorin said as he emerged from another tunnel, addressing the archer solemnly with deep respect. Your ancestor was indeed a remarkable warrior. From this day on your line shall be honored, Thorin proclaimed formally. Bard the Bowman, your name will be remembered, Thorin added, acknowledging the archer's crucial role in slaying the dragon. Moments later, a chorus of cheers echoed down the passage as the dwarves came pouring out of the hidden tunnel. Their faces were flushed with excitement and joy as they celebrated their hard-won victory over the legendary dragon Smaug. "Hacha, it's dead. The beast is dead." The dwarves shouted jubilantly, their voices echoing through the mountain halls loudly. The dwarves gathered in a ring around the fallen dragon, examining the massive corpse with awe and disbelief still. Kili, unable to contain himself, ran up and gave the dragon's lifeless side a defiant kick to test it. The result was that nothing happened to the dragon, but Kili ended up hopping in place, grimacing in pain. "You all right?" Philly asked, catching up to him with concern. "You're shaking. Did your wound open again from that kick?" "I'm fine, just thrilled," Kili muttered, blinking away tears of both joy and mild regret at his foolish action. Thorin stepped up and raised his voice to address the assembled company with authority and pride in his tone. "The dragon is dead. Our vengeance is fulfilled," Thorin declared loudly, his voice carrying through the chamber with satisfaction. "From this day forward, Erebor belongs once again to the House of Durin," he proclaimed, reclaiming his ancestral kingdom. The celebration carried on until the dwarves finally settled into planning mode, thinking about what came next after victory. "Our top priority is to locate the Arkenstone," said Thorin, regaining his serious tone and focusing on practical matters. "Then we'll need to rally reinforcements to defend our newly reclaimed kingdom," he added, already thinking strategically about threats. "The only one close enough to help quickly is Dane," Balin noted, referring to their kinsman who commanded forces. "How many orcs did you say were coming, Eric?" Thorin asked, turning to face the warrior with growing concern. "Over 20,000, that's not even counting the wargs," Eric replied, frowning at the dire numbers they face soon. "Some of them are trolls, sun-resistant ones, likely Alaghai bred for warfare," Eric explained about the enhanced enemy forces. The weight of his words fell like a stone in the room. The cheer drained from the dwarves' faces. "Wait, what? 20,000 what now? What in Durin's name are you talking about?" the dwarves exclaimed in shock. Bard looked around, utterly confused by this sudden talk of massive armies marching toward them from unknown directions. "Orcs, wargs, since when are those a problem?" Bard asked, not understanding the full scope of the threat yet. "He means there's an army, tens of thousands of orcs marching toward Erebor," Thorin explained to the bewildered archer. "They're coming from Dal Guldur and the mines of Moria. If their pace holds, they'll reach us soon," Thorin added. Bard mentally mapped the route in his head, visualizing the path the army would take to reach the mountain. His face paled as he realized the terrible truth about what this meant for his home and family there. "Then they'll pass through Lake Town," he said quietly, his voice filled with dread at the horrifying realization before him. He froze with eyes wide as the implications hit him fully. His home was directly in their path now. Lake Town had no real army, just town guards trained to deal with petty theft and occasional stray goblins only. Against an orc horde, they wouldn't last an hour. The town would be completely overrun and destroyed by the army. "I have to go back now," Bard said urgently, already preparing to leave and warn his people immediately. Bard turned and made to leave without another word, his duty to his family overriding everything else now. To him, treasure, thrones, promises of kingship meant nothing in the face of what truly mattered to him most. Lake Town was his home, and his children were waiting there, vulnerable to the approaching army of destruction ahead. "If you need it," Thorin called after him, "Erebor will offer sanctuary to your people when the time comes." Bard paused, glancing over his shoulder at Thorin with appreciation for the offer of safety and refuge ahead. "I'll remember that," he said quietly with gratitude before continuing on his urgent mission back to Lake Town immediately. Then, without hesitation, he climbed over the dragon's body and vanished from sight, racing to save his home. "Let's not waste time," Thorin said, turning to the others with renewed focus. "We're finding the Arkenstone now immediately." He brushed his hand over Smaug's still form, then looked over at Eric, who hadn't moved from his spot. "You all right?" Thorin asked with curiosity. "You've been staring at the dragon like it owes you money or something valuable." "There are materials here I can use," Eric said, eyes gleaming with something between curiosity and admiration for possibilities. "Then take whatever you need, you've earned it," Thorin said without hesitation, generous in victory and grateful for help. "And don't worry, it won't be counted in your 1/15th share," Thorin added, ensuring Eric got extra rewards fairly. With a final nod of respect, Thorin joined the others on their way to the treasure vaults deep within. Now only Eric and Bilbo remained behind in the chamber, with the dragon's massive corpse before them still. Bilbo, who understood nothing of orc armies or crafting recipes, was staring up at the dead dragon with awe. He felt a mixture of awe and discomfort at seeing the legendary beast lying dead at their feet now. After a long silence, he finally piped up nervously, "Eric, I was wondering, do you think I could maybe take one scale?" "Just one, as a memento?" Bilbo asked hesitantly, hoping Eric would allow him this small keepsake from their adventure. "Of course, there are plenty to go around," Eric said with a friendly smile, happy to share the spoils. "Thanks, you see I plan to write about this, and a dragon scale would make a perfect specimen," Bilbo explained. "I used to collect leaves and flowers, dry them in books, plant them in my garden back home," he continued. "This just feels like the next logical step, really," Bilbo concluded, treating the dragon scale like any other curiosity. He pocketed the scale with care, chatted with Eric a bit longer, then trotted off to catch up with others. Eric turned his attention back to the task at hand, harvesting valuable materials from the dragon's corpse methodically and carefully. Dragon blood, dragon bone, dragon meat, fire dragon scales, a fire dragon heart, all precious materials he could use. Smog's sheer size made the spoils overwhelming. Eric had to craft a chest just to store the massive haul. When the last piece was stashed away, his crafting interface blinked as new blueprints had been unlocked for him. New recipes unlocked: dragon scale armor, dragon tools, forging method, dragon flame steel. Dragon flame steel. Just reading the stats made Eric raise his eyebrows in impressed surprise at the incredible properties shown. Armor stronger than netherite and weapons sharper than his ancient elven blade. Truly exceptional equipment potential awaited him. There was just one problem, though. The material required an active fire, dragon's breath, to forge properly. And the only one left, Smog, had just expired, making the forging process currently impossible to complete now. Fortunately, that mysterious egg from earlier was still tucked away in his bag, waiting to hatch someday in future. Someday it would hatch, and then they could revisit this project. Eric thought optimistically about future crafting possibilities ahead. As Eric sorted the final bits, he noticed something unusual appearing in his inventory that caught his attention immediately. Item acquired, wing membrane. New recipe unlocked, elytra. "Wait, what?" Eric exclaimed in surprise, not expecting this particular crafting recipe to appear from the dragon materials collected. Back in vanilla Minecraft, elytra couldn't be crafted. They only spawned inside end ships floating in the void. But apparently Smog had graciously resolved that oversight by providing the necessary materials for crafting them from his wings. Achievement unlocked, the sky is no limit. Take off time, Eric thought excitedly as he prepared to test his newly crafted flying equipment immediately without delay. Eric strapped on the freshly crafted elytra and gave them a test whirl in the spacious chamber to see performance. He launched forward, gliding smoothly through the air with perfect control and stability in his flight path ahead. It was perfect. The elytra worked flawlessly and would give him incredible mobility in future adventures and battles to come.